Pay attention.
I'm Clinton Gallagher. Around 1980, a very significant occurrence happened to mankind on the planet. 1980-ish is a milestone when the personal computer, the PC era began to change the way everything was done. Disrupted work, created economies, automated processes to the extent possible at the time, making it evident that automation per se was now indeed possible, whereas before we couldn't automate a horse or two hitched to a wagon to carry barley to the general store down the street for delivery. That really wasn't automated. It was what it was. It's a task-oriented process that we learn to do well from start to finish, and then repeat it over and over again. Well, it became so ubiquitous that we don't even look at things that way much anymore, having gone through those tsunamis of change that followed. In particular, was the day one era of CAD, computer-aided design, when drawing became automated, the automation era of drawing, the automated era of automating our imagination into a form that could be conveyed as a means of communication, conveyed to others, and in due time, as we've learned, communicated to machines who read and interpret the drawings. And a human being pushes a button on the machine, and out the other end comes a part that a computer numerically controlled machine made from steel or some other metal that can now be created in yet another form called 3D printing, where when we did the CAD is the representation of the concept that's manifested in a way that can be communicated to a machine. Very important process here. Process of man communicating his thoughts and ideas to a machine. Goes to a 3D printer, and a 3D printer started printing goopy plastic that, when solidified, formed a real useful object, or toys, or what have you, utilitarian objects, hooks and clasps and little monsters, to the point where the process of 3D printing itself now prints with metals. So you can print out gears and connector rods and robotic elements to build humanoid robots. All of which was only possible by starting with the day one tsunami that computer-aided design caused, when it automated the possibility of conveying mankind's thoughts and imagination to a pictorial format that otherwise had to be carved or painted onto a side of a rock wall, or manually replicated, perhaps with ink and paint, or even a stick and drawing a picture in the dirt. Computer-aided design changed the way the world was economically, so much so that in the 80s, when I became enamored with it, I became a self-proclaimed expert at it, such that I was in demand. I was on the top of my game. I had my name in a byline in Wisconsin Architecture magazine, writing a column. I was asked to do public speaking events by the Wisconsin Land Board, the city of Oak Creek, other persons like John Weiss, who were vice president of Children's Hospital of Wisconsin at the time, had testified to the fact that my experience helped the hospital at a time during phase one of the initial build of the hospital itself. That was done all kinds of various different ways to develop the drawings by hand and some at CAD, because CAD was starting to become used by the best and the smartest in the industry. Where I might add, here in Milwaukee, rarely exist and have existed here and there, but rarely exist because the best are rare. So here in Milwaukee, my experience was that 80-20 with the Pareto principle, attempting to generalize about things in a most fair and appropriate manner. 80% of the architects hated the idea of CAD. They didn't like the idea that their art was being automated, depersonalized after years of fastidious drawing and printing by hand, perfect lettering, straight lines, arcs by hand, that were all being now machine generated through the process of using CAD as a software program to tell a machine how to make such a graphic item displayed to somebody. 20% were very excited about it, as I was in the 20%. Now, amongst the 80%, they exist to this very day. They're dystopian sons of bitches, greedy fucking bastards who want it all for themselves. So when something comes along, they don't learn to adopt to it. They do everything they do to block it and prevent others from having an opportunity to utilize it themselves. So the architects, like others, not picking on just the architects per se, but it was them that allowed me to see how it got done in this American form of capitalism and statutory employment, where the work that you do requires permission from the government, who will allow you to work within the law only if you have a license from that governing body. That was developed through a very interesting process that the politicians didn't know what constituted becoming an architect that required a license. So the architects themselves write their own rules and and then the legislators make that into law. Very interesting how these things occurred. Right now in America, there's over 2,700 segregated markets closed off to the American people that have been bought and protected by associations like the Wisconsin Society of Architects. The role of the association in capitalism in the United States is not like the role of the guilds back in merry old England. It came out of the guilds, but with more of a business endeavor in mind, where the members would be charged fees, membership fees, that would be used to buy the attention of politicians to legislate laws of interest of that particular statutory type of employed group of persons, be they architects, accountants, engineers, people who paint fingernails, putting fingernail polish on women. We're going to get to that. Now, here it is, because it has become so ludicrous that we need a Doge. We need Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, to look at statutory employment in our country and what it has done to create corruption and waste and protected self-serving markets held only by licensees of the government itself. They're talking a lot about the non-NGOs, the non-governmental organizations that the politicians set up and then get funded by the government, and they use that to funnel money through themselves. Well, the same thing I'm explaining has been present and served as the precedent, which was statutory employment, requiring a license from the government as permission to do something that would otherwise be a lawful form of work. Being a lawyer, being a doctor. Well, wait a minute. The doctor's a very interesting point of discussion here. Would we not want a surgeon, for example, to be extremely overseen and ensure that he has or she has every credential and skill available to safely perform a surgery on a human body? Of course. I mean, we're not talking insane here, no. What we're talking about is the difference between a government requirement as a license, is feudalism in the economy, creating a whole feudalistic class of workers and laborers that we call professionals. And it's a medical doctor actually equivalent to what a surgeon does in terms of the requirements, and the licensing requirement that's wrapped around both of them as a means to be the sole providers of that type of a service to other people. It has a role to preserve and protect and ensure the safety, health, and welfare of those receiving that service are always maintained at the highest level possible. That's the rationale for statutory employment, which is a far and away subject from the tsunami of change of CAD, one might add, until you realize that what the architects did was they bought new laws in 1990. It changed what it meant to become an architect, because the people like myself who were using CAD to design and build buildings, we could design and build a building in 3 months. It was taking them a year or more. You understand? We had tipped the tables in terms of the output and productivity that was possible through automation. Their only recourse of action was to change the law to keep us out as long as possible. And those who adopted CAD of them themselves, and so be it, because that was an inevitable outcome anyhow. But they wanted to stave off that as long as possible, keep the markets as closed as possible, and it created an entire cesspool that we're now working with nationwide at every element of government you look at. There it is. This is what happened. The putrid breakdown of an organic process that turned into rot because it was encapsulated by regulations and laws that attempted to constrain it and form it into what a mandate that was bought and paid for, rather than organically happening as nature happens itself. The ebbs and flows of discoveries, and here we are. So where I was going with that connection is that the next tsunami of change to come along was all that stuff that we went through when the PC started hitting the desktops. what brand of computer, what PC, how much it is, how much RAM. My first computer had a 10 megabyte hard drive. That was $2,000. A 10 megabyte hard drive. That was $2,000. That's one YouTube video today. So over time, all of that continued to change due to the actual exciting aspects of capitalism, which is competition in the markets. Come around 1986, Tim Berners-Lee turns the key to allow the World Wide Web to get turned on. And boy, did I jump into that, as did another fellow in the school, UWM, a guy that I don't think many people know about. And I only happen to know through happenstance myself. His name is Scott Yanoff. Scott Yanoff created Yanoff's letter. What Scott would do was, like I and others at the UWM campus, use the Unix network to connect to the other universities, which is, in effect, hello, the internet, the World Wide Web that came from ARPANET, that in university campus networks integrated with through the 13 primary servers that were initially used during the day one era. So here we were doing homework on the internet, I'm not even realizing it was the internet, just knowing that we were accessing some computer somewhere. This is how we thought, well, I'm just going to talk to this computer and I'm going to type in a command and do something here. I'm going to write a little program, or I'm going to this, or I'm going to that. Yanoff started discovering and collecting information that he would put together in a format that he called Yanoff's letter. Yanoff's letter was a title such like how to do something such and such. There was a link there to the location, the server address, so where to get that article, and then a short description of what that article was. How to use the internet to use a search engine called Archie. Archie. Oh yeah, those were the days. How to use Gopher. Those were the days where what we were doing, we were using computer systems and to do specific, very narrow tasks. Yanoff's letter then would be publicized throughout the university campus to all of the other university campuses that were on the ARPANET. Son of a gun. That meant that Yanoff's letter was also going to the campus of Stanford, where they claim Yahoo was created by a Jerry so-and-so and his other fellow creator. I can't remember these guys, but what I contend is they were reading Yanoff's letter and talking about it. Well, who is this Yahoo? And as California always being a hippity-hop place and up for it, snatched it in the tech world and ran with it. And then Yahoo was created, and it cost us here in Milwaukee the 80,000 jobs that would come from Yahoo, because those of us, like Yanoff and myself, who were bringing forth our discoveries of this new tech world emerging throughout Metro Milwaukee and the state, and our colleagues and peers, stymied by people like a guy from the Metropolitan Area Chamber of Commerce, a real moron, Tim Sheehy. This guy was there like for decades. And I heard with these very own virgin ears, this moron tell people the internet is a fad because everybody was rushing to all these little conferences in the day one era. What's going on? What is this stuff? And here we are, Clinton Gallagher and Scott Yonoffs and all the others. Here's what it is. Here's what's happening. Isn't this neat? This is some cool shit, man. Yeah, we were really enamored with our idealism and our zeal. It was so futuristic. Myself, for example, having been raised reading books like Tom Swift, who book series written for boys in the 50s who wanted to be the Elon Musks of the day. Tom Swift and his rocket ship to Mars. So we were excited as all get out. But what happened, we were to learn, was the Sheehy did the road blocking the same way that the architects went and paid the legislators to change the rules so people could not become architects. Sheehy did the road blocking by setting up all the people that looked to him for his role in Metropolitan Area Chamber of Commerce to tell people what the time of day was, what was the weather report for business and how this internet is affecting business. So he uses a mechanism that's really easy to identify nowadays because it got picked up and used so often. These these people, what they'll do is they'll make a comment like, it's just a fad. Ergo, if you put any effort into getting involved with that fad, you could become their object of ridicule. So it's a very, very powerful emotive way for skunks and weasels to manipulate people during these times of change when it's all about the money. When money is in one set of pockets, it can rapidly be moved into another set of pockets. And that's what we saw again with the iPhone era, the cell phone and the mobile cell phone era. All these things now, they disrupted things such that here we are now, almost jaded, I might say, because it's like if you don't have one, it's like so everybody's got it. We don't even look at it the same way anymore, do we? But here then we get slapped in the backside of the head, reminded it's me, generative AI, and I'm here to remind you that we're not through yet. We're talking about this brain level stuff now, boys and girls. Brain level stuff that the big question is, can they lock it up with statutory licensing so they create yet another corrupt class of elitists with the Democrat and Republican label or whatever political label you put on no matter what country, because this is not just touching, the good old USA. So what's at risk now, this time around, is the promise that AI makes evident to everybody that we really could and are on the cusp of having utopian societies. Utopian societies where people no longer really had to labor if they didn't even want to. Labor could continue to exist. It was your choice. If you didn't want to, you do something else. And you wouldn't be laughed at if you didn't choose to labor. Because labor became a whole different way of being manifested, the old way that we might think of it as being one of the horses harnessed to a wagon carrying a load of oats or whey or barrels of beer. to be delivered down the street. A laborious process that over this period of time went by in a blink of an eye, historically. It's now bringing forth humanoid robots that do all that bidding for us. So we're at the cusp of an era where we're going to have to really determine a way to ensure that we either A, have that utopian society, and B, find a way to prevent all the dystopian cockroaches from seizing this moment in history and not making it possible for at least that extended period of time that they're still able to hold on with their grip of their dystopian power controls through these governing bodies that have been used and corrupted. Government being the most wonderful thing of all we could have as a species that was totally corrupted at this point in time and really needs to be, like we need a government 2.0. And the AI is like Internet 4.0, World Wide Web 4.0. Automation is here again, and it's in process. The agentic era is beginning. Agentic meaning agents doing work for us, that whatever it is doing the labor, whether it be a software agent providing instructions to some type of machinery that actually manifests some kind of emotion, like pulling a wagon. You can look at that as agents running in robots, whereas earlier they iterated into the era of the concept of our mankind's mind, which is our last frontier. We could go to Mars, all right, but it's mankind's mind that is the last frontier. We have to make a determination in our own minds as to whether we want to live in this utopian society that came about through the wonderful things that our minds are able to produce, or whether we're going to allow the dystopian cockroaches to grab it away from us one more time. I'm Clinton Gallagher, and for now, I've had my say.
Bonjour, comment ça va?
Tell everybody. Okay?
Bye. Come back soon.